start from is something that's kind of obvious, but it's like water. You know that story about water and fishes? Like fishes don't know they're living in water. And one thing is that we're entering an information age. We've been using information as humanity like for thousands of years. Like we've spoken, we talk. Talking is conveying information. But we're now entering a world where the majority of what we create as a society will be information. It might be movies, it might be music, it might be software, it might be the design of the microprocessor that runs my laptop, it might even be the information inside of a pill. When you take a drug, you're obviously consuming chemicals, like the formula, but really you're also consuming information. Someone had to come up with the recipe for that drug and why it would make you better. So you're eating information when you take that drug, if you like. And this is just some examples. The one I like particularly on the left is a family example, which is about a device that you put on a cow that sends you a text message when the cow's about to go into labor. So you know, so even in the area of agriculture, information is there. And there are other examples, from 3D printing to Android, and even hit TV series like Breaking Bad. And I'm here to tell you something. I want you to imagine something with me. In fact, I want you even at this moment maybe to close your eyes, relax in your chair, and imagine a world in which all non-private information, so all information that isn't personal or private, is open, free for anybody to use. Every TV series, every piece of music, every piece of software that's published, every recipe for a medicine is freely available. That's the world I want you to imagine, and it's quite away from where we are today. Right now, the majority of information in the world is not that way, I mean, in general. And so this is the world that I would like us to see us create, or that you imagine in this century. And it's one where all public, non-private information is open, and where creators and innovators are recognized and rewarded. And when I said all, I really meant it. All research, all music, all software. Most people don't think, most of the time if you talk to people, even people who are really into this, that's like too much. They're like, no, that's not going to work. So I want to show you why that is. And I want to start with a fairy story. So you get stories in this one. So I want you to imagine two young children. Their names are Hansel and Gretel. Okay? And Hansel and Gretel are from a very poor family, and they don't have enough food to eat. Their father has gone off to try and find work in the city, and they're left with their mother, and she's ill, and they're starving. And one day, they wander off into the forest. And they get lost, it's getting dark, and then they see a light. And they stumble towards the light, they're really hungry, they haven't eaten anything all day. And they get there, and they find this wonderful house. And it's made of food. And they just can't, even though they know, it's probably obviously somebody else's house, they can't help themselves. They eat some of the house. It's made of gingerbread, which they love gingerbread. And it's not just, you can have different kinds of gingerbread. Sometimes it's a bit hard. And then there's time when it's just really just right and succulent. It's like that kind of gingerbread. And they kind of eat so much, they even feel a bit sick, but they fall asleep contented. They go in the house, there's no one there. They can't believe the door's open, and they go in, they fall asleep by the fire. And the next day, they go outside, and they're a bit worried because they ate a lot of gingerbread. But they can't believe it, because the gingerbread, they kind of gnawed at the side of that wall. There's just like, it's just perfect again. The gingerbread has grown back, right? And they think this is just amazing, okay? And they suddenly think, wow, our whole village doesn't have enough food to eat. Maybe this can happen again. And so they start taking bits of the house, they take as much as they can, and they go back to their mother, and they give her the food, and they've got more left over, and they give it to other people, and they start going back to this house, right? And they go, wow, and they go back there next day, and there's still no one there, and the food has grown back, and it's like, this is just amazing, right? This is the end of hunger, right? No more hunger in the village. It's fantastic. The fundamental thing that humans have lived with for thousands of years, not enough to eat. So, but there's always a catch. So they think this is just great, and they don't even charge anything. They're just delighted that everyone has all this food. Isn't it just, it's marvelous, right? This is a miracle. And they keep going back there, and no one ever seems to be there. The house just seems that it keeps regenerating. It's just unlimited food. As much as they take, it's growing back. But there's always a catch. The catch, I'm not going to give it away too much, is there's an evil witch, right? And so one day, they go to the house, and there's an evil witch. And she's pretty angry that she knows what's been going on, she catches them, and the thing is, you see, they say to the evil witch, like, what's wrong with this? You know, your house is still there. Like, your house is intact. What's the problem? All that's happened is we fed a bunch of people. Your house is fine. And she's like, well, what do you, no, I all my power comes from I sell this food or trade it. I have this, I spent years perfecting this magical house, and you're just giving it away for free. What are you doing? I have a good business going here. She's a capitalist witch. So the evil witch puts a complete end to this. No more free food. This doesn't work. Like, she's like, this is not my business model. And Hansel and Gretel return sad to their village and to the poverty from which they came and to the starvation from which they came. So that's problem one. The other catch is the witch does have a point. She's like, I spent years. I mean, I had to go to witch school. I did lots of research on my own. You know, I didn't just get this from a spell book, you know. I had to spend serious time, serious R&D time discovering this new magic. Like, if you just go, like, giving this food away, it's not going to, like, how will I keep how will I keep improving the recipe? You know, so far I can only do cakes and gingerbread. Don't you want a more varied diet? You know, at the moment my magic only works on gingerbread and, you know, the patisserie end of the spectrum. You know, we need more balance if you're going to be healthy. That's going to take, you know, I haven't worked that out yet. So there is an issue, which is how do you, you know, if you're just giving this stuff away, how are you going to pay for it? And you know, Hansel and Gretel, you know, they do think about this, and they say they're very sorry, and you know, maybe we could do a model where we could charge a little bit. You know, the village could contribute something. And you know, the witch thinks about this a bit, but she says, you know what? I tried that. I didn't used to look like this. You know, I used to be a good witch. I wanted just to make the world better, but you know what? People just kept taking, and they never gave back. You know, at one point I did feed all the villagers, but they just kept taking, they kept saying they would contribute, you know, but when, you know, I put out a donations box and, you know, all I got was, you know, a few sticky jelly beans and, you know, a €1. It was like not enough. This donation model didn't work. You can't trust people to give. So they're stuck thinking about this. So I hope that you've got is that this isn't an updated Hansel and Gretel story, but it is a parable or a metaphor. And so the thing is that is really incredible and really, you know, should kind of astonish us. We don't really get up each day and just think, wow, I live in a fairy story. I mean, how many people woke up this morning and think, I'm living in a fairy tale? I'm living in a Disney movie. Over there, okay, great. Not nowadays, in the back. Because the thing is, you actually are. Because the funny thing is, you do live in this world, in the world of information. You can make unlimited copies of digital information without really any effort. I mean, it's so obvious to us that it's not miraculous, like it just happened or it's happened for a long time. I'm telling you things right now, I hope, and information is getting reproduced in this room. And no one is going, my God, call the newspapers, get it on YouTube. It's a miracle, right? Whereas if I was doing this with food or laptops, imagine I was like giving out new MacBooks, I was touching my MacBook and there were just new copies. You guys, this would be a big sensation. This talk would be more well attended, You're not surprised, but that miracle happens all the time. And it is something so profound. Because if you went back to the very first point of my talk, we're about to live in a world where that is the majority of what we consume and what we produce. We're about to live in a world where we switch from food. Of course, we still need to eat. There'll still be food and physical stuff, but it will be just way less important in our societies and our economies. We'll live in a world of a kind of magical gingerbread house. Right? And we really haven't thought about how that works. We haven't got used to what a world of magic looks like. And most of the time, what we're trying to do is make the world of magic look like the old world where there was no magic, where there never was enough food. And we're also hung up on these two problems. We've got an evil witch problem, which is that there are people with large stakes in the old way of doing things. And the other, though, which is more significant for us, is you've got to work out how to pay for the first batch. The witch is kind of right. If we just go around saying, man, wouldn't it be beautiful if we just shared everything, right? Well, it's more plausible to say that about information. Like, I'm not as kind of, that story, by the way, has gone on for several thousand years, and it hasn't worked so well. But information is more plausible. Like, it is actually feasible for me to give everybody a copy, but it doesn't address paying for the first batch problem, right? Because the evil witch is kind of correct. While it may be cheap to make more gingerbread now, she had to do a lot of work to come up with it. And if you want to have a plausible story, and the answer to that, though, is we do have an answer. And I want to come back to that thing at the beginning. I said an open world is desirable and possible. It really is possible. I'm about to tell you a bit more how, but it's also really desirable. Because it kind of is the end of hunger. It kind of is a really different society than we have imagined for a very long time. It's a world of unimagined abundance. It's a world where no one is denied access to a life-saving medicine, which actually thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people are today. Who here has actually seen Breaking Bad? Which I mentioned at the beginning. Breaking Bad is a hit US TV series, but the central character is a really middle-class guy. He's a good man, he works in a high school, and he gets cancer. And he's in America, the richest country in theory in the world. He's not especially poor, and he can't afford the drugs he needs for his cancer. Because of patents, because of the monopoly rights we give out today. But where anyone can read the latest research or watch the latest movie, and could do so openly and freely. Now, I want to then just talk about, okay, sounds really desirable. It's like having a house made of gingerbread, but where's the catch? And we talked about the catch. The catch is it costs money to make a movie. It costs money to make software. How do we do that? And the answer is actually really simple, because we're already doing it today. Already today, we pay for most medicine not through actually medical research, not just through drug patents, through restricting access to the gingerbread house, right, and saying, if you want any gingerbread, you've got to pay, right? Actually, you all pay, if you pay taxes, for medical research. Half of all the medical research done in the world is paid for by the government through us paying collectively. Now, I live in the UK, and the funny thing is, not only do we pay through government research and development, but then my taxes help pay for the National Health Service that buy drugs from drug manufacturers, right? And I wanted to give you an idea of how bad the system is right now. Actually, I'll give the example of the United States. In the United States, US citizens pay $374 billion a year to buy drugs through various mechanisms. Okay? Now the point of paying for drugs, I hope we've worked out, is you pay for their manufacturing in a pill. That's really cheap, right? It's about 10% of the cost. The rest of that money is so we can invent new medicines, right? That's why you're paying for drugs. How much money actually gets spent inventing new drugs out of $374 billion? About $50 billion. The rest of it gets wasted or used for profits, for drug manufacturers, or it goes for marketing. I don't know if you know, but in the United States, you're allowed to advertise on television to persuade customers to demand your drug, right? And so, for example, one of the things that goes on in the US is drug manufacturers spend large amounts of money with the same kind of drug. Like Pfizer will invent a drug, and then Novartis will invent the same drug, basically, and then they'll have a massive advertising war to persuade consumers to buy their drug rather than the other drug, right? So I don't know if you know, like, people have heard of Prozac. There's like 7 things like Prozac that are almost identical to Prozac in the late 90s that you could buy, and drug manufacturers would duke it out. And they even do really naughty things, right? Some of the really naughty things is kind of sort of bribing doctors almost to prescribe their drugs. Sometimes drugs that turned out to have no health benefit and some serious side effects, for example. They've made major issues, like where companies have made billions of dollars selling drugs. One of the most famous, even, in fact, that's quite disturbing is Amgen, which makes EPO. EPO is famous because it's used by people illegally to win cycle races. It's basically artificial blood. But you need it if you're on dialysis, if you've got problems with your processing of blood. And Amgen, for example, who made billions of dollars after commissioning a study that turned out to be pretty dubious, saying that, dialysis patients should get way more EPO than they actually need. And when I say this is worth billions of dollars a year for people to take too much EPO, because, by the way, dialysis patients are a dream. Like, if you're a drug manufacturer, you want people with an illness that goes on forever. They never get better and they never die. They're your perfect customer, right? Because they keep needing the drug. And dialysis patients kind of fit in that category because they keep needing blood transfusions, if they've got serious problems. So this was huge, and so this goes on. So $374 billion spent for $50 billion of R&D. It's that bad, right? We could just fund it through, you could just take that money, raise it through taxation, get rid of patents, and you'd be up $300 billion a year, right? So this world is possible. We already do it. I'll also take just another example. I'm going to fix it on one which is really accessible, which is music. People are not aware, today, most music is under copyright, right? Which is, again, like, it's like the house. Back in the late 90s, and even today, some people got an experience of what the gingerbread house was like. And they're really experiencing it today a bit with Spotify, although they pay for it. It's like unlimited access. Back in the late 90s, there was this incredible moment when suddenly you could access pretty much all recorded music that people had bothered to rip from CD for free through Napster, right? Now, I'm not advocating that because it didn't involve paying the artists, but it was an experience of what a gingerbread house looked like, right? People have sort of experienced it sort of illegally since. Like, there's a massive, promoter of piracy called Apple Computers, who used to sell, iPods with capacity for, 16,000 songs. Who has ever legitimately bought 16,000 songs? Nobody, right? The thing about music is, if you go and do the numbers, we could make all music open, free, pay artists as much as they're being paid today, and it would cost less than €1 a month on your internet bill. Right? Now, you have things like Spotify sort of doing that. They do it at 10 times the price. And Spotify, let me make something really clear, Spotify are great. They give you an experience of all-you-can-eat music. There is a point. Spotify will never be interested in making sure every person has access to music, because they can always make more money charging 20% of you €10 a month rather than charging everyone $1 a month, right? Or if I do I'm not doing the numbers quite right there, but that's essentially it. It's like the witch with her gingerbread house. Maybe she could make it available to everyone, but she'll make way more money charging to the rich, you know? So I just want to make it clear this is really possible. And I come to the last point in this that I want to say, which is, and it's important at a conference like this, where I've got, you're kind of already interested, or maybe a little bit biased. But there's also a danger that here we think we don't need to do anything, Like, look at Linux, or maybe if people have heard of it, but you've heard of Android, right? Like, open source just succeeds on its own. Free software will make it, We just need more people to go hack, or teach more kids how to code. And the sad truth is, yes, that's really useful, but this doesn't happen on its own. Thank you. There's a really important point about this, which is that you can't just leave it up to people going, hey, we'll just make our own gingerbread house. We don't need that evil witch. We'll go and build our own one. We'll do our own research and development. Because one is there is that problem, which is Hans and Gretel get that idea. They think as long as we survive long enough and we get enough food, we're going to be like food researchers and we'll make our own house. But the thing they tend to discover, like I said, 20 years later, they've gone to university, they've got their own magical gingerbread house. And what they discover is like no one will contribute just the upkeep. No one will help them make their gingerbread house maintained most of the time. So the basic truth of it is the free rider problem, aka people are a little bit selfish, which is just natural, like we all are, makes it really hard to just do kind of the open model in a closed world. It's great and it's amazing what it's doing, but it will only ever create a small amount of the information we want. Like if you're really honest, by the way, and you look at Linux, Linux was funded by the government a lot. It was built, the original version at AT&T. AT&T only released it because they were under a consent decree from guess who? The US Antitrust Department. The US Antitrust Department is the government. That's why Unix was open at all at the beginning. Linus Torvalds was a PhD student when he wrote Linux. The version he based it on, called Minix, was built by a professor at a university, right? And when you look further, a lot of Linux development is funded by large corporations who mostly do proprietary software. The open model is amazing, but it won't scale to most stuff that we want. There's no way for movies to be made in an open way and make enough. There's no way you're going to fund a $100 million movie most of the time. And kind of crowdfunding is cool, but just look at its level compared to classic VC. It's really tough. But there's real hope, by the way. There's something called the government. There's something called the state that we invented thousands of years ago to solve problems like this. To build roads, to build hospitals, to solve problems where we need to come together and do stuff as a whole and make sure everybody contributes in a fair way to build things that we really need. And the thing, though, is the state is kind of all of us, but it takes us to go and be activists, to go and do something to make the state and government policy change. Thank you. We need to come together and not become politicians, not get involved necessarily in politics, but actually get involved, if you like, in supporting activism and get together. The other aspect is this vision, I'm just going to go back here, this vision needs to be shared. It needs to be shared across not just coders, but scientists. Across the moment, there are all these different verticals. There's open science, there's open research, there's open coding. We need to get together with a shared vision and a shared narrative and say, this is the world we want, and we are going to do something to make it happen together. It doesn't mean that we're all going to go and become activists, but we need to contribute in some way. Otherwise, this will not happen. It doesn't happen by grassroots building open projects. That's fantastic, don't get me wrong. We should definitely keep doing that. But that alone will not deliver it. So, the point here is this world is so within our grasp. And if we don't get it right, I want to end with a point here, which is dystopia is the default. Because there's a story. Let's go back to the witch story. Let's say the witch is the only person. She's got this incredible technology, and she doesn't turn out to be so generous. She can become very rich and very powerful. She controls whether you live or die in terms of food, I get you. That power in a world of information is the same. If you control information because it is so cheap to copy, with it comes immense wealth and immense power. Who is the richest person in the world today? Bill Gates, an information monopolist. I'm not saying anything against him, by the way. It's the way the information age will work if you let it go its default route. Dystopia is the default. Incredible concentration of power and wealth. And not just over money, but the ability to control what you think. There's already really good research evidence that Google could change an election if it wanted to. That it could change people's minds enough to swing an election. We cannot allow that dystopia to happen. So, to conclude, we are entering an information age. Information is this magical substance. An open world is possible and necessary. But a closed dystopia is the default if we do nothing. We need to act to get the state and government and policy to support this. That's the only way, really, we can pay for an open information age properly. And don't get me wrong, it's not a government that centralizes stuff. It is a government, it's a market-based model. It's a world in which government collects money for music, but the money is distributed based on what people choose to listen to, not by the government deciding. But that we must choose an open world. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you're interested in getting involved in that kind of thing, then please come and talk to me and talk about what's open knowledge. And there's also an open knowledge leaders program that will kick off in July, where I am going to be working with people as the kind of the vanguard of an information age. So FFFI, Open Knowledge International, please come and talk to me afterwards. Thank you. Yeah.